Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for everybody who is attending. My name is Helen Gradstein. I'm a regional digital finance specialist with the UNCDF covering the Eastern Caribbean. And welcome to the Fostering E-Commerce Ecosystem in the Small Island Development States Challenges and Opportunities session of the UNCTAD's E-Commerce Week. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the use of digital solutions and the flow of data and has accelerated the adoption of digital payments around the world. E-commerce in the digital economy has been instrumental through the pandemic to provide for safer, contactless, and social distance means for making purchases and transacting, and has changed the ways in which business operate and in which people and businesses interact. At the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic has shed a lot of light on the inequalities and the digital divides that hamper our ability to derive inclusive gains from the acceleration of digital finance and digital transformation. So I'm looking very much forward to today's session. We have the honor to hear from public and private sector stakeholders across small island nations to share their perspectives and collective views on the unique experience of e-commerce stakeholders that operate within the Caribbean and Pacific Islands. Throughout today's session, we're going to explore some of the unique challenges and opportunities that e-commerce stakeholders in small island nations face, and the innovations that might hold promise to foster a digital commerce ecosystem across small islands. A quick housekeeping, we will be taking audience questions throughout the duration of the session, so please do feel free to chat inside in case any audience member does have a question, or to raise your hand and to pose a question as well throughout the duration of the session, and we will answer them or try our best to answer them. So I'm very happy to introduce our three panelists. Today we have Vani Nadies, the CEO of UNCTAD Holding Limited in Papua New Guinea, Sam Saley, the co-founder and CEO of Sky Eye Pacific from Samoa, and also John Outridge, the CEO of the International Financial Center of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you so much. So we are going to start with hearing a little bit more from our panelists who are going to explore some of these elements today, and then we will be able to open it up to a broader panel discussion. I would like to start with our panelist, Vani Nadies from Papua New Guinea, to understand the context and some of the perspectives from the Pacific. Thank you. And Vani, apologies, you are on mute.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Helen, and thank you, everyone. And we appreciate the invitation today. So my name is Vani Nadies, and I'm from Papua New Guinea. I run my internet service company called UNCTAD Holdings Limited for the last 9 years. And over the years, we have leveraged on technology, trying to find solutions and provide that enabling pathway and platforms for our locals and rural people across Papua New Guinea. And Papua New Guinea has 22 provinces, with 8 million plus people and 800 languages. So we try to see how we can be able to simplify what we do through technology and educate them through what we are trying to provide through our platform. So it's an exciting time for Papua New Guinea, where we're getting into the digital age and how we can be able to use that to enable our people across the country, and more so our rural communities, our villages and SMEs that we actually focus on. So during the COVID pandemic, it has really challenged us, big time. So these are some of the solutions that we have brought forward, and e-commerce is one of the things that we are using to drive these, in our country, in Papua New Guinea. So that's basically what our company has been doing over the last 9 years, and it's been exciting so far. And we see that people are slowly getting into the digital age. We're running, education programs for digital e-commerce on what we're doing, so that we keep teaching our people that, this is the way forward. This is a new life that we need to get used to, and start moving away from cash transactions to online platforms, so that it makes everything easier for everybody. So that's all about a little bit of introduction about what UNCTAD Holdings is doing here in Papua New Guinea.
Bonnie, thank you so much for that introduction. I do have a few questions. Given the market in Papua New Guinea, what are some of the challenges that e-commerce stakeholders might face that are quite different than other economies around the world? And also, what are the challenges that your platform has faced in trying to onboard and also trying to expand these technologies in that market?
Well, basically, the challenge is having a good ICT infrastructure across the country and to the last miles as well. That's first challenge. The second challenge is that reliability and affordability of logistics solutions in the country. And of course, the payment system is actually a little bit harder because we only have very few people. But if they can be able to open the market for solution, which is still needed in the country, it'll be really, really great. Where I think central banks should be also looking for the likes of PayPal, Stripe, and other financial services to start operating in the country to foster competitive rates in payment platform. And one of the things is that most of our rural people and people who wants to be in these, most of them don't have bank accounts. And we're talking about digital revolution, but if we don't get it to the people and make it easier for the people, they probably won't get into these digital, e-commerce platforms. So these are some of the challenges we have, where also network coverage in remote areas is still needed. And if we have to grow the e-commerce in PNG, we've got to make sure that this connectivity is everywhere in the country. Then we'll be able to get everybody learning how to digital market as well. So, there's so many challenges we face, but as MSTRAD Holdings, vision is to create that enabling environment. We try to speak to, authorities and the correct stakeholders. So we bring them with us to what we want to do and continue to push the vision forward to provide some solutions about creating that, easy logistics, distribution channels. So when customers or when SMEs, when people order their goods, SMEs are able to actually, deliver their goods to the end users. Because sometimes, the challenges is that when SMEs try to bring their goods into the city, they have to pay expensive, logistics, like the cargoes that they have to put on the airplane or ship. It becomes really, really expensive. So these are challenges, and Papua New Guinea is a very mountainous, and our terrain is so hard, and logistics of getting goods to another place is just so expensive. So if you talk about challenges, those are some of the challenges that I can be able to highlight here in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, thank you so much. So most of the merchants in Papua New Guinea are those who are rural and without access to accounts, are operating mostly within their own local jurisdictions without the ability to expand both domestically or internationally. Is this also the same case for larger merchants who are trying to enter the e-commerce or trying to develop an e-commerce ecosystem in more populated areas, or who might be larger in size? And are they also facing challenges when trying to develop the e-commerce ecosystem, both to connect to international as well as the middle income and higher middle income populations in Papua New Guinea?
I think every corporation or every business, they have their own challenges, and compared to big businesses and small businesses, big businesses have capital, whereas we focus on, small businesses and the rural community that we want to impact. So obviously, yes, they do also face the challenges of, logistics, to get to another place. They also have to pay an expensive, logistics cost to go to one place. But for us as being locals, we know how to get ourselves around, where we can be able to go to one place to another in a more effective, efficient way. But there's also challenges, well, where, getting to, at some point, we have to cross the river. Like I do connectivity across the country, and I have to walk, I have to go by boat, even I have to raft, I have to cross the mountains, and that's just to bring connectivity to the rural villages. And when we get there, we try to train and educate them on how to be on digital platforms. So if you talk about big businesses, probably they have the capital, they can do it easily. But for us, as we are growing and progressing, and still trying to invest back into the business to provide solutions to our local peoples and our small to medium enterprise, we have to go, take a lot of, steps to get there, but otherwise we still make it happen. So what we have done, UNCTAD, is that we also try to bring in the strategic partnerships where we bring in the partnership with the corporations, like big corporations, like Steamships is a big company here in Papua New Guinea, which has been lived for almost 100 years. So they're actually working with us to help our local SMEs to bring their goods, like the shipping goods, 20-foot container for free, but they pay just a little bit of port fees to get their goods across. So this kind of innovative strategic partnership that we have, so that we can be able to help our SMEs continue to do their online, or continue to be in digital platforms as well, and continue to do business. So, we try to work around the problems to find solutions so that we can be able to help our people across the country, and more so focus on rural connectivity. So that's what we have been doing. It's been a challenge. I'm not saying the road that I took and being in this technology space as a women, own technology business, but because we are passionately driven and we want to bring value and solutions to impact our people in the rural connectivity so that they can access to the world and they can be able to trade locally and globally. But one of the things that probably I can bring into this conversation is that, perhaps because we're talking global here, maybe a push for FedEx and DHL to, make integration in PNG as easy as they can do for other parts of the world as well. So if our government of the day is interested, then, probably a government incentive like lowering the freight cost for logistics companies and through our local, New Guinean airlines, our airlines here in the country, it'll be all helpful. So the e-commerce platform that we have, we've integrated these distribution channels because that's one of the challenges that most of our people face here in PNG. So when you go onto our e-commerce platform, you have a selection of who you want to distribute to. Mm-hmm. And we've partnered with these people that will help our SMEs and people who wants to do business, and it makes it easier for them. It's just one-stop shop. So identifying those challenges and providing those solutions, creating that enabling environment for people. So like I said, it's an exciting time for Papua New Guinea, getting into this digital platform, and we will have to keep on educating until everyone gets away from traditional way of touching cash into online platforms, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. It's certainly clear that digital payments is the first step in order to enable the ecosystem and that access to a bank account, access to formalizing elements of your own merchant operations, and then connecting to the e-commerce platform. There's a bit of a sequential element to all of that, which takes a different form than in different jurisdictions where all of that might already be in place at one time for a merchant. I think before we continue on to hear about the experience in the Caribbean, what are some of the key challenges in the case of Papua New Guinea in terms of enabling digital payments for these merchants? Is it mainly, are there regulatory or legal barriers that are preventing technologies to come to the market? Or is it the quest to modernization of infrastructures in order for to pave more of the rails for digital payments for these merchants? Or is it just uptake in general and perhaps voluntary exclusion?
So in general, like the payment system is slowly making its way, although a more open market solution is still needed. And if you talk about regulatory, the central banks, like I said earlier, should be looking for the likes of, PayPal, Stripe, and other financial services to start operating in the country to actually foster competitive, rates in payment platform. And there's a monopoly here. So, you can imagine that the cost of it may be, too high. So these are some of the things that I feel that our regulatory bodies should look into. If they want to create an enabling environment, they have to bring all the players in so that everyone has a choice of, who they want to be with or who they want to, the platforms that they want to use. So that's just my take on that. If our government is really serious about creating an enabling environment and look at governance side of it, and try to flex the policies to create an enabling environment that is favorable for our people. Right now, there's restrictions where sometimes it becomes it suppress growth in digital economy, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. And I just want to invite our other panelists in case you have any questions for Vani before we continue on to hear more about the Caribbean. Thank you so much, Vani, and we'll be coming back to you shortly to discuss some of these elements, taking a global perspective of the small island nations. Thank you. Next, I would like to also invite our colleague, John Outridge, the CEO of International Financial Center in Trinidad and Tobago, to hear a little bit more of their experience in Trinidad and Tobago in developing the e-commerce ecosystem, which is quite a different jurisdiction and has a very different context and set of elements in the Caribbean as compared to in the Pacific, and to understand a bit more about the opportunities and challenges faced there. John, over to you.
Good day, everyone, and thanks again, Helen. Appreciate the opportunity to represent Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean in this very important webinar. And as I was listening to the other presenter, when you think about small island developing states, it's really a hodgepodge of different maturity, because Singapore is also considered a small island developing state, right? And you can see the maturity that they have, and something that we all aspire to be one day. So I'm the CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago International Finance Center, and basically one of the key things that the government has sort of focused the organization on, particularly during the pandemic, back in April 2021 last year. So it's actually reflecting, it has been 1 year since the mandate has changed at the company, and our focus has been really on 3 key pillars as it relates to really boosting e-commerce and financial inclusion, particularly within Trinidad and Tobago. So again, one of the first key areas is, really driving a cashless agenda. And to do that is having a strong focus in terms of developing a national financial inclusion plan. And what does the government, regulators, and other stakeholders, what should be the action plan, the strategies, the policies that needs to be enabled to support that. The second element has been to basically to look at the state, look at the public sector as one large e-commerce client. How do we enable e-commerce capabilities, particularly within facilitating online payments, right? And being able to sort of change the operating model, again, to have citizens be able to do business online. Trinidad and Tobago, while we do have, we are fortunate, we are oil and gas producing country. So, from an economic perspective, the country has a pretty high GDP, a lot of developed areas, but we also do have a lot of rural areas at the same time. And we do have citizens who have to travel quite far to engage with government services. So again, extending the e-commerce model from the state to the citizenry is a priority. And it's all about moving the indicators from a UN sustainability goals and ease of doing business. And then the third aspect, again, when you look at the region as a whole, the Caribbean itself has between 14 and 16 million people, but when you look at our diaspora, you're looking upwards of about 50 million people. So it's quite a sizable market. And, from where we have been seeing, particularly in the government, and again, during the pandemic, and again, this goes back to where we are trying to work, establish Trinidad and Tobago as a fintech-enabled hub for the Americas, because of our geography where we sit between North America and South America, lower down on the food chain within the Caribbean. There's huge opportunity in terms of, again, having these international providers like the PayPal, the Stripe, right, Visas and the MasterCards to come and basically set up shop within our jurisdiction. The idea is what we want to do is we have been seeing a huge trend in terms of where you have large technology companies looking for emerging economies to basically pilot or to test out new capabilities. Because again, of the saturation with the, the established and the mature markets, we have seen emerging markets becoming of huge interest. A lot of new technologies, blockchain, crypto, and all of these different solutions, being tested in countries like Cambodia and so forth for digital IDs, where a lot of these fundamental problems have not yet been solved. So we want to make sure from at least a Trinidad perspective that, we have the right enabling infrastructure, we have the right enabling policy. We definitely have the talent on island to support the development of that, so that when, again, these large international companies or even these fintech entities who would like to pilot their solutions or look for a launch pad where they can test out their capabilities, can use Trinidad and Tobago as that hub to come in to get connected with all of these new technologies, tokenization, etc., and be able to incubate and develop their products and use Trinidad and Tobago as a launch pad, basically. So that's the goal, the high-level goal of Trinidad and Tobago. Actually, that's the ambition of the nation, but our real core focus is driving a cashless agenda for Trinidad and Tobago, and again, looking at the same time as we are maturing the environment to be able to do e-commerce within the state, what are some of the policy decisions that we can also put into place, particularly with our banking sector, to now make e-commerce capabilities more pervasive to both the business and the citizens at large.
Thanks, John, so much for that introduction. And you're very right. There's a wide range of different maturities of different small island nation markets. And it's interesting because there's some very unique and specific challenges to that jurisdiction based on its maturity, but also some that are kind of overarching across all of the islands. And one of them, which I think Ronnie was also mentioning, was just the ability to ship easily and transport goods across islands that do have multiple islands as part of its market. For instance, Trinidad and then Tobago, and the goods between Tobago and Trinidad for those smaller merchants, and then also across the other islands. What are some of the biggest issues that merchants are facing in their distribution for when trying to make develop the e-commerce ecosystem in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's the same challenge even, large nations like the US have, right? Is that sort of solving that last mile logistics, right? How do you cut down the time from 1 day shipping to 1 hour shipping, right? And there's only so much you can do, right? With physical vehicles and so forth. And you see all these new technologies like drones and sort of things being sort of piloted. In recent times, we are seeing a lot of investment taking place, a lot of focus being done in terms of solving the last mile equation. Persons setting up operations with scooters, electronic vehicles, small form factor type cars to facilitate the delivery. As I mentioned, we have been doing significant work, particularly within the e-payment space, which has yielded a number of what I would call sort of gig economy type platforms coming up during the pandemic. So for example, when COVID first hit Trinidad and Tobago back in March 2020, there wasn't a huge uplift in terms of locally developed mobile application products. And then here comes the pandemic, and here we are 2 years later, where we have literally 10 different ride-sharing apps that are taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, because again, people got accustomed, and they are doing quite well, very successful. So, in Trinidad and Tobago, if you do come down here, there's and one of the key things that sort of drove that was Uber was actually in our market for a very short period of time. But at that time, they were in the typical Uber style, bad boy behavior. So it didn't sit well with our regulators, but they left. But it created the white space for persons to be like, there's a market for this. And then, even food delivery apps, which we probably have about 6 or so, and again, all of those things could not have taken place without the infrastructure, without the support from the financial institutions. And what we have started to see recently is companies like Visa and MasterCard taking a huge interest in the private sector, sponsoring those initiatives, again, from their own global mandates to sort of grow transactions and so forth. And this is what I was mentioning in terms of we are seeing those companies not only focus on the technology, but also pivoting, investing in vehicles, investing in private contractors to, again, do the last mile, because again, with food delivery is one thing to have the platform to facilitate the order with the restaurants, but then you need to get the food and you also need to be able to deliver it in a predictable manner. So we are seeing particularly a large number of our like taxi operators really now pivoting to be that sort of last mile type facility.
Yeah, thank you so much. And one element that you touched on was the cashless agenda and e-payments to underpin some of the development of the e-commerce ecosystem in Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago is quite an interesting market because it is so connected, has very strong infrastructures, and yet the society operates in quite a bit in cash, particularly when we get to the smaller merchants around the area. Yet they also mostly have access to some form of bank account. What do you think on their end is some of the larger, for the smaller merchants in that space, the larger challenges that those merchants are facing connecting to e-commerce platforms? And what are some of the considerations to bridge those gaps?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Trinidad and Tobago is very interesting place. Our story, is very rich. We are a small island, about 1.4 million people. As I mentioned, oil and gas in the 1970s and 80s, we have been very fortunate, even in those early days to have an economy the size of Dubai, right? And you would actually see the country sort of evolve beyond, it didn't evolve in pace with the population. So we still had a Caribbean mindset. And I think one of the largest inhibitors that is only now sort of being sort of pivoted is where, even with our financial sector, which is quite strong, it's one of the largest sectors we have in the country. It employs 10% of our population and contributes equally the same amount of percentage to our GDP. Most of our banks, our indigenous banks, have expanded beyond our shores in the regions, in the Africas, throughout the world, so they're doing quite well. So, in that sort of outward focus, what was happening, particularly on the small merchant side, is where you weren't seeing a lot of availability of products to small merchants. The focus was always on the larger side, supporting the multinationals, supporting the franchises, so definitely access to the technology, access to the infrastructure, particularly for those merchants to be able to move to cashless, wasn't largely there in the beginning. So again, you being a small merchant, and you always see this, right? This is where you see the largest creativity in any country, right? With the persons who have to invent the ways of doing business, right? So cash absolutely is still king within Trinidad and Tobago. However, through the work that we have been doing and through the engagement we have been doing with the banks, and then, again, largely I attribute COVID that really impacted digital transformation very positively, because again, it started to impact the bottom line for these institutions. I can't remember who said it, but there was an old saying, you can't expect a man to understand something when his salary depends on it, right? So again, we saw that the banks started to take notice, and they started to now invest in more capabilities for those cash merchants. So again, partnering with the local fintech communities, being able to establish low value payment systems, to at least be able to now sort of support that agenda. It may not make as much bottom line sense to them as the typical type of business. Because again, in order to support the merchants, particularly who transact in cash, when you're talking about, the cottage industries and vendors and so forth, one of the key things that really sort of excludes that particular segment is the fees, right? Because at the end of the day, if I'm selling something for $2, I can't expect to pay 3% of that $2 back to you at the bank, right? So there needs to be a meeting in the middle. So it's almost we had to work with the banks, and then even on their own agendas, some sort of altruism needed to sort of take place where it's part of a greater doing good. It may not affect you in the profitability. And I believe all of these things that are happening globally in terms of ESG and, not just mattering what your profit statements look like, but what have you been doing has certainly started to, change the minds of the CEOs of these banks, so, and I'm definitely from our end, one of the key things we're doing from a government perspective, again, that is a strategy, that I believe has been working, you want to do business with the state. We are now signaling that we are coming to market with e-commerce. And then when you look at our opportunity size, it's quite attractive. So it's almost a quid pro quo. You want to participate in this, you need to help on the other end. So we want to understand what are you doing. And I have been seeing I would call it the race to the finish from these banks in terms of developing the type of products and the wallet capabilities that would be more in line and in tune with the needs of these merchants and smaller market providers.
Correct. And before we move on to our panelists from Samoa as well, and turn our attention back to the Pacific, and my last question, John, and thank you so much for these amazing insights, is for the merchants. It does seem like digital payments, again, is one key to unlocking the e-commerce ecosystem and both driving down the cost of e-payment technology. First, having e-payment technologies enter the market more fully, for merchants to then be able to connect to e-commerce platforms, but then also driving down the cost of these products beyond just the traditional bank account, and also the traditional bank account, for it to be a viable option for their business. One element I also wanted to ask was access to finance by these small merchants in order to formalize themselves a little bit more, to increase the formalization, to then connect better to the e-commerce platforms, both domestically and internationally, to serve the diaspora market outside. And with digital payments, comes a lot of data, particularly if small merchants are being able to connect and use their digital payments platforms, transactional data that comes with it, and different sets of data. Do you think that there is a lot of innovation or elements that might foster increased access to finance as digital payments becomes more mainstream for these small merchants, in order to bridge a financing gap that some of these small merchants might face, that might be preventing them from moving them onto bigger e-commerce platforms or expanding their distribution network in that way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is where, again, it's good that this is part of our mandate. So this is where the fintech sector absolutely has a huge role to play, right? Because traditionally, when you look at a bank and then you look at their risk appetite and then you look at those segments, right, it doesn't really match up, right? And again, we have a huge credit union sector that sort of fills that gap. But, one of the key things, particularly on financial inclusion, is something that we recognize, right? If we really want to mature as a country and as a population, we really want to ensure that there's equity across the board, people must have access to credit, right? They must be able to expand, they must be able to grow. And to that point, one of the examples is, we actually have a fintech company that started off early on by applying, because again, from a central bank perspective, we have been, although our central bank has been largely conservative, because we do have a very strong, resilient financial sector, we do have a cautious approach, and that has sheltered us a lot from the global challenges, particularly in 2008. But now it's becoming a little more innovative sort of appetite focus. So as I was mentioning, we do have some fintech companies now who are now entering the credit space, for example, and who are providing these digital platforms where merchants can go online, fill out a means test and be approved for a loan under 24 hours, within 2 hours or so forth, right? But again, it is based on a certain cap, based on the money license, lenders type facility that they can offer. And interestingly enough, one of those companies was so successful in doing this that, one of the banks saw what they were doing and took an equity position in them, because again, they were servicing, and it was good because And this is one of our largest banks, right? They saw what this small fintech was doing in terms of providing finance capabilities, particularly to medium and small enterprises, businesses, right? And they also started to understand the need. So they also started to offer, again, last mile facilities, financing facilities. And one of the key things that they were doing, coming back to the strategy, why I say fintech is important for banks, you know, if you are a small business, you may not have the certain criteria to apply for financing, audited financials, et cetera, right? Your books are basically, you know, what you remember in your head. But if you are a bank now and you are now working with fintechs, for example, and these fintechs can say, hey, you know, we are offering these digital facilities, these online inventory platforms that at least you are able to create some sort of transaction history with these small merchants. And the bank is able to kind of look at that data. The bank can establish a position and kind of understand, you know, what sort of business you are in, and I could kind of support you and grow, you know. So again, it's now you're seeing where the banks now have to play a deeper role in terms of, you know, becoming partners, you know, versus simply facilitators, particularly for that segment, you know, providing those industries with the tools, one, to assist them with their business and to help them scale and grow, but at the same time, it gives the bank the comfort that it needs. It understands the business, it understands and again, everything is going the way of transactions, right? So, you know, you may not have a traditional mindset, you may not have a building, or you may not have the traditional type of assets a bank would like to see, but you may have a pretty good business and you may have a pretty good market, right? And then again, you need credit and you need certain facilities, and then it goes back, Helen, to then for the bank understanding, you know, my products are not matching this segment. What products do I need to develop now to offer? So we are seeing it, at least we are seeing the use cases being proved in a small way. So it's really now for us to continue to support that sort of policy and then trust that the institutions catch on, because, you know, when you look at, you know, in terms of how they are growing, that is the what I call the untapped segment, where traditionally they have not sort of tapped into. And there's no understanding of the potential there. So I think it's, you know, I think I am seen as a small pivot, but we need to get there quicker if we really want to move to a cashless society.
Thank you so much, John. No, I also see a lot of promise, and I'm excited to see some of these innovations in different markets, both not only on the digital payment side to facilitate the connection to e-commerce, but also in the data innovation side and leveraging data, new ways for alternative credit scoring or alternative ways to finance and help these merchants grow as they connect to e-commerce platforms for a bigger e-commerce ecosystem. I would like to also now invite Sam from, apologies. Here we go. I would also like to invite Sam to also speak about some of the unique challenges that e-commerce stakeholders are facing in Samoa. Samoa is also a very different market with its own unique challenges and a very different population as well. So it would be very interesting to hear how the e-commerce system is faring in Samoa and some of the unique challenges that your stakeholders are facing in Samoa, particularly with your platform and then also in general. Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Helen. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, talofa everyone, and greetings. This is the MOA app, the super app of the Pacific. Our vision is to ensure that our grassroots vendors have the opportunity to be included in the digital economy. But there are many critical hurdles that our grassroots vendors face to be able to participate. First, and as mentioned by the other panelists as well, is digital payments. Our rural vendors do not have credit cards, and very few have bank accounts. So to participate and transact online is almost impossible. So this is one major hurdle for our rural vendors to participate in e-commerce. Anyone that buys anything on e-commerce, they expect it to be delivered to their home or in the front door. But Samoa, as most of the other Pacific Islands, do not have street addresses. So it is almost, it's not sustainable to provide that kind of door-to-door delivery in a sustainable manner, because we don't have the street addressing to help us do that. And then if you want to have a delivery fleet, it is quite expensive in a rural economy, island like Samoa. Also, if you're looking at how using public transport, it's not very reliable. And commercial vehicles, it's very expensive. So another major hurdle for us in trying to establish an ecosystem for e-commerce. Last but not least, and we have many other hurdles, but these are the ones that we want to highlight today, is illiteracy. Our Samoan population have very high literacy, but in our mother tongue, which is Samoan. And all the platforms that are available, like Facebook, Instagram, Shopify, they're all in English. So our rural vendors have a hard time trying to learn the technology, but learn it in a foreign language. So that's very difficult. But also, the platforms like Facebook and Instagram has turned them off because it also comes with fraud and a lot of distractions. So they've started to pull away from using technology because of bad experience. So these are some of the major hurdles that we face. And the solution, we believe, is the Maua app. This is an e-commerce platform that we built from the ground up specifically for the island environment. So first, digital payments. We created our own payment gateway and integrated into our platform. We have integrated it with the mobile money wallets of the two providers that we have in Samoa. We've also integrated with Stripe. And so our vendors now are able to get payments to their wallets, their mobile wallets, because it's as if you have a mobile phone and a SIM card, you're able to open a mobile wallet account. Street addressing, we created our own. Because we are a technology company and we have a lot of skills in GIS, we created our own street addressing, and every 2 square meter of Samoa has been given a 9-digit code, which is its address. So we're able to pretty much street address the whole of Samoa, even coconut trees. In terms of delivery, we developed a dedicated app for drivers. So like Uber, anyone that has a smartphone, has a vehicle and spare time, they now can be part of the delivery network and even earn extra money. For literacy, illiteracy, we have also created a dedicated seller app. Now this app is available in both English and Samoan, and we've made it as streamlined as possible to be focused specifically on the art of sales. Taking a photo of your product, putting a description on it, putting a price on it, and sell it to the world. So this is what we have come up with, and just some screenshots of the buyer app. So it's quite feature rich. It's got loyalty points, it's got rewards, it's got messaging, saved addresses, and a few other features. In terms of payments, as I mentioned, card payments were integrated with Stripe. So global international payments with cash on delivery, e-vouchers, and the 2 mobile wallets. And we have user reviews, but it's only verified transactions. So a user cannot review a delivery or a vendor unless they've had a successful transaction. And this is trying to encourage people to trust the platform, because the public will, if you tell them to trust something, it's difficult if you're trying to sell it. But if it comes from a user perspective, a user review, it's a lot easier for them to trust that. In the vendor side, as I mentioned, we have a dedicated app for them, and we have now given them the data analytics kind of framework, where we can show them the top selling items, the stock levels, and giving them information that can help them grow, like making sure that their top selling item will never ever go out of stock. So revenue as well. So, and all of this information is available to our informal vendors as well, and it's for free. So we're trying to bring them up to the next level to try and participate in the digital economy. On the driver app, it's quite simple. It's very simple with the driver app. If there's a delivery, they'll get routed to the closest driver, and you'll give them where to pick it up, where to drop it off, and how much they're going to be able to make. And you may be able to see the 9-digit code there of Sky Pacific. So that's not only do we give a 9-digit code, we can also name that address, that particular spot. So we named our office. And overall, we also have the admin portal or app that is linked to all the 3 other apps, so that we have someone there always online to try and help, because this is new frontier in the Pacific. This is something very new for us, and we have to try and handhold all the different stakeholders to ensure they have a seamless and productive experience, positive experience on our platform. In terms of payments, we're quite happy to report that digital payments now dwarfs cash payments. When we first started off, it was majority cash payments, but through methods of how we're trying to bring more international buyers, we're able to reverse that. And now majority of payments is digital. In terms of growth, our growth has been exponential, Q1 2021 versus Q1 2022. So we believe in a holistic approach. The platform and the e-commerce will not work if the ecosystem is not, everyone in the ecosystem is not benefiting. So we believe in a holistic approach to make sure that everyone in the ecosystem is benefiting. And we have we had an independent consultant firm verify the 6 SDGs that you see on the screen that the MOA app is contributing towards in Samoa. And I hope that the audience and those that are able to help us grow the platform and ensure so that you can join us to ensure that no one is left behind in the new global digital economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sam, for giving us a little bit more of a deep dive into your current e-commerce platform in Samoa. And I have quite a few questions, actually. Yeah, because it's very interesting that it's being able to connect all of these different pieces of the puzzle in Samoa, particularly using digital payments and seeing the progress and growth of digital payments. In terms of the market, as you had mentioned earlier, Samoa has a smaller market, a population of less than 200,000. And is the MOA app targeting only the domestic market? Does it also have reaches or accessibility outside of the small market? And the sustainability of the product, is the product able to be, the e-commerce platform able to be sustainable in such a market as well?
Thank you. Yes, that is one of the key disadvantages of a small island is the market size. No matter how good your platform is, if the market size is not enough to sustain it, it will not be successful. So, but although we have only 200,000 Samoans in Samoa, we have about 700,000 Samoans overseas. And this is a snapshot of remittances in Samoa coming into Samoa. And this is where we want to tap into, and we have already started. Our people overseas, our Samoans living overseas, they always want to help their families at home. So they can buy on the platform and have us deliver medicine, wholesale shopping, hardware, flowers, everything that you can, we'll try and get everything that you can think of on the platform. So this is where we've seen the biggest growth so far, is by tapping into our diaspora population in New Zealand, Australia, America.
And another question that I do have is that Sky Pacific is working with a large range of different merchants from rural communities and others. And you had mentioned that cash payments were initially the largest form of payments, and then it progressed over to more digital modes. What has been some of the experiences and key challenges faced by not only Sky Pacific, but also by the merchants that come onto your platform when trying to connect to the platform itself and trying to integrate digital payments into their modalities and operations? But I think in general, just the uptake, changing that first initial practice from your local area to uptaking these digital platforms, particularly for older merchants who have been established for a long time and doing business in a particular way.
Thank you. Yeah, no, there's certainly a mindset change that has to happen. And the only way that the fastest way that we've come across that can get them to change their mindset is to give them sales. If they see sales on the platform, immediately they will try and be more attentive and put more products to sell online. Our team does a very good job of selling, door-to-door selling, and onboarding the vendors. But we also have partnerships. This is a very key area for us, is our partnership with the grassroots organizations like Women in Business, the Potasi Development Trust, Nualea Lofa, who are the advocacy group for people living with disability. Those kind of partnership is very important for us to be able to access and talk to a market that's very different in terms of how they operate. So if we go to them, they won't trust us. But if we go in partnership with someone that they trust, then it will be much easier for them to try and adopt what we're trying to provide as a benefit. So yes, it definitely helps with partnership.
And does that also apply for more vulnerable merchants, or those who are in more marginalized categories, either the lowest income brackets or perhaps women-owned merchants as well? Does the same strategy apply, or do you have to also take a different strategy to enable their access to the e-commerce system?
Yeah, no, we do have to have a customized approach to a lot of the different vendors. For those that are quite in vulnerable areas or quite remote areas, and also can't, it's difficult for them to take on the technology. We have done a warehousing for them, where they bring, and one of our success stories is a lady that produces handicraft bags. And she used to travel on a bus, and then a taxi to get to a market. And if she can't sell those bags, which is valued at around 100 tala, which is about $50, if she can't sell that on the day, and she has to go back, she has to sell it at a loss just so that she can make the fare back to her home. So what we've done with her is we have taken some of her bags and displayed it in our shop and sell it online and gave it prominence in our platform. And now we have been able to get people from overseas to buy those products, and we transfer the funds. The funds goes directly into her mobile wallet.
Correct. And the last question I have before we move on to the broader panel Q&A was on digital payments again, which I think is a common theme that is both unlocking access to e-commerce across the world, and of course also specific to these small island nations. But but also uptake can sometimes be a challenge, both in terms of the regulatory environment as well as the technologies that are available in the market. What has been the current context in Samoa and the uptake of these digital payments to continue to promote the e-commerce system?
Thank you. We've been fortunate that our central bank has been very progressive in terms of fintech and opening up to as long as they are comfortable with the technology we're using, they've been very encouraging of fintech. So in terms of digital payments, mobile wallet is like globally, especially in countries that don't have a very good banking infrastructure. Its mobile wallet has been taking up the slack of what the banks can't do. So that's where we integrated our platform to is mobile wallets. But there's also a limitation of mobile wallets that eventually the vendors want to cash out, and there's not enough agents out in the field. So that's one of the the issues that we've had with our vendors, where they've been reluctant to come on board because there's not enough vendors close to them that they can cash out the money when they need to. But if we are able to build the ecosystem that they do not need cash anymore, that they can use that mobile money for anything else that they can think of, then I think that's where we need to build the ecosystem. If everyone is online, then just like how it is in other markets, especially in China, you don't use cash anymore.
Thank you so much, Sam, for all of these insights. And so at this stage, for the last couple of minutes, we're going to move on to a bit of a panel discussion. I think, sorry. And so one of the questions that I would like to start with is the role of public and private sector partnerships. And Sam, I think you were about to allude to this part in your presentation as well, but it would be great to hear about the role, particularly in small island nations, that it can play in fostering the e-commerce ecosystem. You know, I know that public-private partnerships can help, particularly in the distribution of government programs and aid across or other government services through e-commerce platforms. I'm wondering if this is something that is in what stage of e-commerce development is that like in your jurisdiction, and is this something that is quite required or very important in the context of small island nations for developing the e-commerce platforms? Perhaps John, we can start with you, then Sam and Vani, or feel free to just jump in if anyone has any insights to provide. I think perhaps that's better.
Well, if I can start, because that is what we're now in partnership with the government, where the government is using our e-voucher system to distribute funding to fishers and farmers. There's a World Bank project to try and help farmers and fishers scale their operations to be commercial or semi-commercial. So they have to apply first. And so the distribution of the funds used to be manual first, and it took 2 to 6 months for the distribution for a farmer to get those funds. Since using our platform, that is now cut down to 7 days. So it's been a very successful start to the program, where the farmers get e-vouchers on within 7 days, and then they can do their buying on the platform. And because it's e-voucher, where the government is also, we worked with the government to limit what those funds can be used for, and it was only specific to what the program is for. So the reporting side of it is also very strong, and so far it looks like it seems to be a win-win situation in the partnership between us and the government.
Thank you. Another question I had was specific to small island nations and the role of fintech. What are some of the promising innovations that you think might be more impactful or really focus areas for your jurisdictions, or that might be thematic across small island nations that really do warrant a lot of attention in the market for e-commerce?
Well, Helen, I could definitely think, I think one of the themes that you're picking up here from all of the conversations is really the maturity, particularly in the digital wallet ecosystem, because that is the kind of, I would say, the vehicle that really needs to sort of be matured, because the idea is you want to get rid of cash, you want to make cash unattractive to use, but you need to mature that ecosystem. Again, there's so many use cases, a digital wallet or a central bank digital backed currency can provide. The idea is, what really is the right mechanism to sort of replace cash. And I think the key things are, making it pervasive enough, making it acceptable in various both public and private enterprises, but then also accessibility and fees, but I do think that's these are the foundational measure, because, in a large percentage of small island development states, you have huge social welfare programs. And, listening to Sam this morning, West Samoa has a population of 200,000. That's the population from Trinidad that we distribute a lot of social welfare to. So it's almost like a direct use case, I would say. And 80% of the social grants that are disbursed are done via check. Again, persons not having bank accounts and so forth. And again, it creates, I think we have huge challenges and problems that sort of provides in itself, where it has created a third-party predatory type facility where persons now take these checks, go to groceries, cash it in for a fee. Again, they don't have a bank account, they don't want to go to the bank account, so it's a huge challenge that we are trying to solve, and again, this is listening to the presentations this morning, it's giving me some ideas.
Yeah, it's actually quite fascinating. I fully agree. And I think the last question before we close the panel is on more marginalized consumers, particularly, for instance, in Papua New Guinea. Vani, you were also mentioning trying to onboard and enable them to access e-commerce in general. What are some of the innovations that might be the most impactful to onboard the most marginalized merchants across these small island nations?
So, it's an exciting time. Now our government is really now looking into digital platforms and passed the bill. And there's also innovations that are happening with big companies. And I think one of the greatest challenge we have is that educating our people to be educated in the digital platform. And it's an exciting time where most of our people, they're smart, but literacy level is very low. So how can we simplify the jargons to make them understand how to get into this digital platform? Because if you talk about digital, most of them probably don't know, because they're in the rural places, and the challenges we face is that access to information and access to enabling education environment in the rural areas is very less, and they find their own ways of getting out there, and people give them information to learn from. But if we're going to bring this in, we've got to see it from their perspective to simplify it so that they can be able to understand. So, many of them are left out. So what we do in our digital platform that we've introduced during COVID, which is called ShopSmart PNG, we simplified in an environment where our people can understand just seeing the pictures, just and also in there speaking the language or dialect, so that they understand how to get into it. It's a challenge because the way we speak now, it could be complicated for them to understand. So how do we get that message across? And you can imagine, like, there's about 8 million people in our country, and most of them needs to understand what digital is. When you talk about the runaway, because they haven't used a computer, they don't know what you know what I'm saying. So what we need to do is that, okay, how can we bring them along? How do we simplify it so that they understand that, yes, this will benefit them in the long run? So we try to simplify our platform, focusing on our local people that will definitely understand how to use digital technology and working with the banks to ensure that internet payment gateway is there, and making sure that they also have bank accounts, simplify everything else so that everybody gets on board. And that's how we can create the digital revolution. And we partner with, government should be an enabler where they bring the internet infrastructure to every parts of the last mile and make it more affordable. Like, I really do love what, Sam and my two colleagues here shared, and I've got some ideas here that I can be able to see if I can integrate in what we are doing and help our people more and educate them more. And by action, we influence our government to see what we are doing, so support us more to create an enabling environment for everybody else.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. A big thank you to all of the panelists. I think it was actually, quite an interesting and fascinating topic. And certainly my brain is also moving now, hearing about all of the different innovations and the different approaches that people are, different stakeholders are taking across their small nations to advance the e-commerce system. So I would like to say a big thank you to everybody. Thank you to the panelists. And thank you to the audience members. And I know the next session, I think, is a closing session in the e-commerce week. So we're very thankful to be a part of this. Any last words from any of the panelists before we close?
Thanks, Helen, for being a good moderator. I think everything flowed well and really appreciated the perspectives from the other two panelists. It's always good to get a sense, what the human condition is across the world.
Oh, absolutely. It's so great to share the session with you all. Great conversation, and we hope to stay in touch and help each other with what we are doing in our own country and share ideas and make it better for everybody else. So thank you.
Yes, same here. Thank you, Helen, and thank you to our panelists as well. It's great to hear what's going on in different environments and how maybe we can tap into some of those learnings, and definitely helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everybody. Good afternoon and good night and good morning to those who are attending early. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.